Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Planning Commission meeting of October 9th. And with that, start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And if Senior Planner Dynas can lead us, that would be great. Madam Secretary, if you could please call the roll.
Please let the record show that all planning commissioners are present.
Thank you. Next item is approval of the minutes. And I do have actually a clarification on the minutes. In reviewing them, I was looking at it, and it was my intention. I made the motion on the, let's see. On item number 3 of the meeting of September 25th, I had made a motion and there were some conditions on it. One of the things I had discussed is kind of the configuration of the opening at the front, whether it looked like a garage door or not. That's not in the recorded action item minutes. So Madam Secretary, if you could please review the video or audio on that. If I did include it in the motion. If not, staff understood the intent, I think, and that would be my comment. But other than that, I don't have anything.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd concur with that. I make a motion that we approve the minutes as changed tonight per your direction.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second to approve the minutes as modified.
We have a motion and a second. If we could vote. That item passes 4-0 with Commissioner Doner abstaining due to his excused absence. Moving on. Now is the time of the meeting where we have public comments. Anyone wishing to address the Planning Commission during the public comment section or on an agenda item is asked to complete a request to speak form available at the door. The completed form is to be submitted to the Planning Commission Secretary prior to the individual being heard by the Planning Commission. Anyone wishing to address the Planning Commission on a subject other than those scheduled on the agenda is requested to do so at this time. In order to conduct a timely meeting, there will be a 3-minute time limit per person and an overall time limit of 15 minutes for the public comments portion of the agenda. State law prohibits the Planning Commission from taking any action on a specific item unless it appears on the posted agenda. Madam Secretary, do we have any public comments?
No, Chairman.
Thank you. Moving on to the consent calendar. There are no items on the consent calendar. Moving on to public hearing. Item number, says number 2. Should it be number 1? I'm just curious.
Item number 1 is the meeting minutes approval.
Oh, okay, I see it. Thank you. Thank heavens we have you to keep us straight. Item number 2, Coastal Development Permit CDP 17-0012 to demolish an existing single-family dwelling and construct a new 3729 square foot single-family dwelling in the residential single-family RSF4 zoning district at 32611 Sea Island Drive. Do we have a staff report?
Yes, and before I introduce Senior Planner Belinda Dynas, I just want to clarify that the zoning code provides different levels of coastal development permits. And typically what comes before you is a major coastal development permit, and we don't sort of differentiate that. We just call it a coastal development permit. But the code also allows what's called an administrative coastal development permit. So based on certain criteria that are met, it could be if it's not essentially within Coastal Commission's appeals jurisdiction, it can qualify for an administrative coastal development permit. And this particular property that is going to be coming before you, this project qualified for an administrative coastal development permit. So we held the administrative hearing, and there was an action taken on that. However, the community development director has the ability to raise an administrative coastal development permit to a major, and we did receive a timely appeal, which we have a 10-day calendar appeal, and I decided just to raise this to a regular or major. So it's just like any typical coastal development permit that would come before you, but there's been a little bit of confusion. Some people weren't quite clear what was happening, so I just wanted to clarify. You will see reference to an appellant and some concerns by the appellant. We will address those concerns, but this is not actually an appeal. So I just wanted to clarify that. And with that, Belinda, if you would please give the staff report.
Thank you, Ursula. Good evening, Chair McCann, planning commissioners, and members of the public. My name is Belinda Dinas, staff planner for the Abdullah residence at 32611 Sea Island Drive. As Ursula had mentioned, on September 11th, a hearing was held for an administrative coastal development permit for the proposed project, and in response to the timely filing of an appeal from a neighbor, the Director of Community Development is recommending that the Commission consider the project as a regular coastal development permit and conduct a de novo hearing. The project is subject to a coastal development permit for demolition and new construction of a single-family residence located on property within the coastal zone. The property is not located within the appeals jurisdiction, and so this coastal development permit is not appealable to the California Coastal Commission. Next slide, please. Thank you. Here's an aerial of the immediate area with the subject site located in the Monarch Bay Terrace neighborhood. The subject property is located within the residential single-family 4 zone. Next, please. The property is developed with an existing 2,660 square foot, 1-story single family with an attached 2-car garage, which will be demolished entirely. The lot is approximately 24,580 square feet in area. The applicant proposes to construct a new 3,729 square foot single family dwelling with an attached 3-car garage. The overall program consists of a 1-story structure with 5 bedrooms, 5.5 bathrooms, with new landscaping and hardscape throughout. The proposed project meets all of the development standards for the RSF 4 regulations. Next. And next, please. Here is a chart showing the site's development standards and how the proposed project is in compliance with these standards. The maximum height of the structure is allowed at 24 feet, but the applicant proposes a height of approximately 14 feet, which is less than the HOA's maximum height of 15 feet. The project has received HOA approval. Next, please. Here's the proposed site plan. As I'd mentioned, the proposed home consists of 5 bedrooms, which requires a minimum 2-car garage. Highlighted in orange is the outline of the existing structure as it relates to the proposed development on the existing building pad. Here's a floor plan showing the layout of the 1-story structure. And here is the front and north elevation along the side. The exterior is proposed with a soft contemporary style with standing seam metal roofing, smooth stucco, horizontal cement siding, and various architectural elements applied to the structure to add interest. And next, please. Here's the side and rear elevations for your reference. Also, here are sections as it relates to the 15-foot HOA height limit and the rear slope. The Planning Commission must make the following findings in order to approve a coastal development permit. Staff provides justification and analysis in support of the findings as described in the staff report and draft resolutions. The proposed improvements meet the development standards of the municipal code and is consistent with the city's general plan. The project is not located within, between the nearest public roadway and the sea, and public coastal access exists along this portion of the coast. However, staff has received correspondence from the neighbor expressing concerns with private views, landscape area, slope stability, and biological impacts. As outlined in the staff report, the city zoning code does not enforce protection of private views. The project meets the minimum standards for landscape area of 25%. A geotechnical report is reviewed and approved by the city prior to building permit issuance, with regular inspections for grading during construction as well. And the existing rear slope of the property has not been identified as an environmentally sensitive area with high-value habitat. Next, please. Therefore, this project constitutes infill addition of an already developed property with no significant environmental impacts with the proposed work. The proposed scope is consistent with the pattern of development of other new construction and major remodels in the immediate vicinity. The project conforms to the certified local coastal program and zoning code development standards. As such, staff recommends approval of the proposed project subject to the findings and conditions in the draft resolution. I would be happy to answer any questions you may have regarding the project and the staff report. Thank you.
Thank you, Senior Planner Dinas. Do any of the commissioners have questions for staff? Commissioner Donor?
Linda, the current landscape, does that include the slope behind the house? The coverage, the
It
percentage
does
of
not, and
coverage?
so the applicant had calculated the 25% landscape area based on the building pad, and so they are showing a little bit over 25% at 25.6% of the building pad area. So it does not include the entire slope vegetated area toward the rear.
So if the slope were included,
It would be well over that requirement.
and there's by right would be 2 stories?
Correct.
And what about the current setback versus the proposed setback?
Off of the rear, the existing structure is relatively in line with the proposed structure. I believe the proposed structure juts out about 2 feet or so from the existing structure towards the rear, which otherwise maintains more than, I believe, over 90 feet of setback, where a 25-foot setback is required off of the rear. The majority of the proposed area is oriented towards the front of the lot on the existing building pad, maintaining a 20-foot front setback.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a question, actually. What's the distinction? You said the zoning code allows a 24-foot max height, but the HOA has a 15-foot maximum height. Is that in the CC&Rs, or?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions. With that, I'd like to open the public hearing. Madam Secretary, do we have any speakers? Thank you. If you could, when your name is called, if you could come up and speak, we'd love to hear from you. And if you could just state your address for the record, that would be great. Nick Herbert. Thank you, Mr. Herbert. Carol Tink Fox. Thank you.
I do want to state that the portions of the Coastal Act that are relevant to our project that we have designed for include water conservation, erosion control, and geologic stability. We have a landscape architect, Jeanette Mestre, who's designed a drought-tolerant landscape that meets the area requirements as the planner has explained. We're not proposing changes to the existing landscaping at the rear slope at all. Also relevant for water conservation, all the plumbing fixtures on the property will be compliant with the Cal Green standards for low water usage. And as for erosion control, we have had Ray Gadiri, our civil engineer, design the drainage to meet with grading codes and all the best practices for water filtration. He's also prepared an erosion control plan for use during construction activities as required. The site has also been analyzed by David Hamilton. He's our geotechnical engineer, and a report has been submitted with the application. And he is here tonight as well in case you have any questions. There's a tall slope at the rear of the site, and all the development is held back of the slope edge. The retaining walls are planned in the landscaping at the uphill side of the property and above at the rear at the uphill side of the property adjacent to the uphill neighbors, but also at the above the rear slope. Footings will be deepened per grading codes and per the geotechnical engineer's recommendations to maintain slope stability. He tells me this will actually add stability to the existing slope. And of course, the engineer will observe the footings depths during construction. So these are all the issues relevant to this discussion about suitability of the proposed development to the provisions of the local coastal plan. In regards to neighbors' concerns about view protection, the local coastal plan is specific about its policies of view protection from the Coast Highway, the headlands, Doheny Village, Capistrano by the Sea. They do not apply to every street in the city, and certainly not Sea Island Drive. We have 30 seconds, okay. The view protection in this neighborhood is handled through the HOA, and we have obtained approval from the HOA prior to the coastal development hearing. I do have landscape plans and grading plans. If there are any further questions, they weren't required as part of your submittal, but I have them here as reference if you need them. And I'd be happy to answer any of these questions or any other ones you might have if you have them. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is David Hamilton.
Good evening. My name is David Hamilton. I'm the project geotechnical engineer. We performed a geotechnical engineering investigation and geologic report as required by the city. It was prepared for the standard of practice of the city standards for such a development. As they've already mentioned, the existing residence is one story. The proposed residence is essentially in the same footprint relative to the back slope, maybe a foot or two outside. But modern codes require you to deepen the foundations then. So we will actually deepen the foundations much more to reach the code setback. So we'll actually relieve any pressure that even less than what the existing house had put on the rear slope. All the slope stability calculations meet code, static and seismic. They're stringent in 2017. So there was just a concern from the neighbor. They made a comment that the reduced setback from the slope impacts slope stability, but I would say it doesn't, and I don't think the city will have issue with that either. And I'm here if you have any questions about the soils or geology with regard to the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Kareem Abdullah.
Good evening. I'm Kareem Abdullahi. I'm the owner at this property. I have nothing to say at this time.
Thank you. Short and sweet. Tabby Abdullahi.
Good evening. My husband just came, but we thought that we have to fill it out if you ask us a question, but I have nothing to say.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, with that, we'll close the public hearing. And I'm sorry, sir, you had an opportunity to speak and you had your time. Thank you. So public hearing is closed, and we should discuss it amongst the commission. Does anybody want to weigh in?
I could just chime in and make a couple of comments.
Sure, please do.
I know you guys have heard me say this before, but just as a reminder, the city does not typically enforce private HOA CC&Rs. We don't enforce their noticing requirements, and we don't enforce their restrictions on private views to the extent they have any. The city doesn't have its own private view ordinance, as I've told you before, so that's just something simply from the city standpoint. We don't protect HOAs, can protect them if they would like to, but it's typically not a city issue.
Thank you. Commissioner Nelson?
So, Madam City Attorney, if the applicant had come in with a two-story house and met the development standards but didn't have an approval from the HOA, we would, as a commission, still in theory have to approve it if it met all those standards, but they would have a problem with their HOA.
Absolutely. Typically, we like to see as a courtesy that the HOA has approved the project, but we have been put in some tough situations where we've been forced to move ahead even without HOA approval.
If I could add, I think in that case, the community character discussion becomes a little bit more relevant. If none of the other homes in the neighborhood are two-story homes, that then would be something that the Planning Commission would have discretion to speak of. We looked at community character relative to this project. We showed some pictures of some other houses, and in staff's opinion, it's one story to one story, essentially the same footprint. We believe that it is within the character of the existing neighborhood. Thank you.
I do have a question, Madam City Attorney. Out of curiosity, the appellant did not speak. Is that unusual, or do you know? I mean, they're just letting their appeal stand for itself on its own merit?
As Ursula explained earlier on, this is really technically not an appeal. This is an item that could have been determined administratively, and then at her discretion was elevated to become a normal public hearing. So with that, we're proceeding as though it's a normal public hearing, not an appeal. We do have records from some concerned property owners that you can consider to the extent you deem relevant.
Thank you. What are people's thoughts and feelings? Commissioner Donor?
Well, first off, the issue of private views, I guess, has been fully explained. That's the purvey of the Monarch Bay Terrace Property Owner Association, and they have approved that. So any enforcement of views would be at the neighborhood level with the homeowners association and not with the city. Second, the reduction of existing landscape and planted areas. In my reading, there contains no environmentally sensitive habitat, and there is no adverse impact of the landscaping. Third, the minimum coverage has been met without the slope, and the slope would be considered as part of the landscape area. So it's significantly over our minimum requirement. Third, the slope stability. There's very minor change to the existing natural land form, and the proposed changes must conform to the applicable regulations for geological erosion forces, flood and fire, and minimize any risk. And prior to issuing any grading permits, they must submit a grading plan in compliance with city standards. They must submit a geological report in compliance with city standards. They must submit a hydrology and hydraulic study and to support the sump pump and any drainage plan. They must submit a landscape plan, and there's significant requirements prior to issuing a building permit and prior to final approval. And all of those items must be met before they can move forward. So I think that's all of the issues that I think are addressed. So I see nothing that would preclude us from approving this.
Thank you. Commissioner Opal?
I think Ray said it very well with everything and agree with him that there's no real reason that this would not move forward.
Thank you. Vice Chair Murphy?
Chairperson. Yeah, in the same vein, I know that it's confusing oftentimes when there's kind of an inconsistency with the zoning codes and when somebody's got an HOA and there's all these other hands in the pot trying to mix it all up. And the zoning codes are very important, as you all know, and they provide for us consistency and understanding of what is provided for. And when people purchase land in a neighborhood such as this one, yes, maybe at the time that the land was purchased, people decided, because this is a while back, that they would build one-story homes and smaller structures, and they would be able to keep all their views. And we know that based on the codes, that's not always necessarily true. And in this case, it isn't true. There is room for expansion. And in this particular case, the positive thing is there's no building up. There's no, we don't see any issues about building up. And so I think right now the new property, as they would like to see it, is in a pretty good stance in terms of being able to do that. Of course, we are mindful at all the time how these alterations to the houses or rebuilds will impact the neighborhood. But this particular case, it seems like it's an appropriate plan. And I know from the letter that we received that there are concerns about the landscaping, about the slope stability, about the biological impacts. And that's why we have great staff who go way far beyond what's ever asked of them, because they want to do what's right for everybody. And they don't want to miss anything. They want to be always fair and measured. And so if there are any questions, they are there for you, and they're happy to show you where they are and how they got where they got. And as was mentioned, the staff and we up here are very, very always concerned about degradation of any portion of the existing slope and the stability of slopes. And that's a different issue, but that's always on everybody's mind if it looks like there's going to be an overbuild on a slope. I think everything else was said, and to me, it looks like a very appropriate build. The size of the house, it looks like it appropriately sits where it is on the site. And there's been a lot of good work put into this, and sometimes it's disappointing when things change, but that's what we live in a world, things change. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Commissioner Nelson?
Yeah, I would echo many of the comments of my fellow commissioners. I think it's a tough situation to be a homeowner in this neighborhood and have a view that you have today that may be gone tomorrow. And looking to this commission to solve that problem, unfortunately, there's not much we can do. We don't have any control over what people do to their neighbor's view. Views can be protected, they can be purchased, view easements and such, but that is not a purview of this commission, unfortunately, for those that are impacted by those views. I mean, the house, I love this neighborhood. It's got some beautiful homes, some great mid-century modern homes that I'm a fan of. But it's an older neighborhood. It's built in, the late 60s. And in many cases, many of those homes have now been removed, and there's new homes. I think there's some two-story homes that have been built. This one really fits in well with the character of the neighborhood. Visually, it's appealing, but it also, in many ways, respects some of the architectural form that's existing in that neighborhood. And I couldn't find any good reason to deny this project, so I would be in full support. And that's my comment. And I'd make a motion that we approve the project.
Thank you. Just to throw out a few thoughts, I would echo the thoughts and statements of my fellow commissioners. I find that this project complies with the Dana Point zoning code in all aspects, and with respect to I think from a health and safety, life safety perspective, geotechnical would be the greatest concern. It's going to be, it has already a geotechnical report from a qualified individual that'll be reviewed by the city's geologists and geotechnical staff and consultants to make sure that it's compliant, that the soils are studied and footing depths are confirmed and all that. So I'm very supportive of the project. I think it's a very nice design. Although that's my personal opinion. If I didn't like the design, but it would fit the same configuration and height, I would vote for it too. So I'm in support of the project, and I would second Commissioner Nelson's motion.
So I'll make it a formal motion because I didn't read in the specifics. My motion would be to approve coastal development permit CDP 17-0012 to demolish an existing single-family dwelling and construct a new 3,729 square foot single-family dwelling in the residential single-family RSF 4 zoning district at 32611 Sea Island Drive.
Second. That item passes 5-0. Good luck. Moving on, Section E, old business. There's no old business. New business, there's no new business. Staff reports. Do we have any staff reports?
Yes, I have a few items this evening to share with you. First is that the City Council has, reestablished or more formally established a homeless task force. There was a revised charter for the task force, and the sort of membership makeup was changed and broadened a bit. And there was a desire by the City Council to have a planning commissioner appointed to the task force. So this evening, I am just giving you the heads up that at the next meeting, the October 23rd meeting, we will have an item on the agenda asking for a nomination for a planning commissioner to be on that task force. They currently meet on the last Wednesday of the month at 1 p.m. Once the new membership is and everyone comes to the table, that could change if that doesn't work for everyone. But just a little bit of information to think about between now and our next meeting. We will be holding a zoning cleanup item coming up here. So this is kind of a best practice. Zoning codes get outdated or there's little cleanup things. Sometimes it's literally the changing of a word. As we work more and more with the zoning ordinance, we'll find things. We actually have a multi-phase approach to cleaning up our zoning ordinance. And the first one, staff was really trying to select non-controversial, what we consider low-hanging fruit items, because we're going to be bundling them all together. It will...
Parking?
Yeah, like parking. It will be a local coastal plan amendment, so there's that process that we'll have to go through. But we are intending to have the first workshop at your next meeting, which is the 23rd. We're proposing to do it as a workshop format, and if the commission is available, and you can get back to us in the next few days, but we are proposing a 4 p.m. start time. If that cannot work, we can start it at after the regular agenda, and we would just be staying later. So we are right now proposing this 4 p.m. start time. We think we would go until about 5:30, break for dinner, and then come at 6 p.m. And we're envisioning to do it more in a conference room. It will be a Brown Act meeting. The public can attend. They can speak under items, not on the agenda, but they wouldn't be participating in the workshop. It is a workshop for the Planning Commission. And then just for your reference, there will be a de minimis CDP for another property on Sea Island Drive coming up at the October 23rd meeting as well, just to give you an idea of what's on the agenda. And finally, the other item will be a historical inventory update on the agenda. You may or may not have heard that the city has conducted a community survey. Over 1,000 registered voters were surveyed via email and phone. It is a statistically valid survey. It is a representative sample of the community. And the city will be pushing out those results through social media. So if you're subscribed to any of our social media channels, see those coming. And once the document is final, there will be a link to the city's website. You can see the presentation from the consultant if you view the last city council meeting. You could watch it that way, but the document's not yet available. So I just wanted to let you know there's some interesting information there. That concludes my staff report. Thank you.
Just have a redo. The very first item that you were speaking about, I was kind of zoning out.
Oh, I'm so exciting. That makes me so sad.
When you start talking about the city council,
so the first item is the homeless task force. So the city council has kind of revamped the homeless task force, and they are requesting that a planning commissioner sit as an appointed member of that task force. So we will be bringing an agenda item before this commission at the next meeting, October 23rd, asking you all to kind of nominate and agree for someone. So if you're interested, start lobbying your fellow commissioners before that meeting. Thank you.
Lobby in compliance with the Brown Act.
Yes, thank you, Jen. That's exactly what I meant.
Ursula, how long do you anticipate the historical inventory item will go? Is that a long item or?
Yeah, gosh, it's always hard to predict. I guess it's a function of how many people are interested to show up. There was a community workshop, Matt. How many people up?
We held a workshop about a week ago. We had about 25, 30 residents. I think we addressed a lot of the concerns. So it was an hour all told. So we haven't got a lot of controversial or negative feedback. It's mostly been supportive of what we're bringing forward. But like Ursula said, it's hard to predict as we get closer to the hearing. I would anticipate probably 20 to 30 minutes, but that's purely based on our experience so far.
Okay, and the reason I was asking is this, if my fellow commissioners want to think about just doing the zoning cleanup workshop at the end of the meeting or not. It is dependent on how full and how lengthy that agenda is. So maybe in commissioner comments, if you could weigh in which is your preference on timing of the workshop.
And just so there'll be the two items, that de minimis waiver. Just so you know, we've decided after this one, we will be raising all coastal development permits in this neighborhood as full hearings. This one had already been in the queue prior to that. And I think just for a little bit of background, there's about 7 houses under construction in that neighborhood. And I just think that perhaps the community's reached sort of this kind of tipping point with their sort of tolerance. And that's why they're becoming a lot more engaged. So I don't know whether this one will be controversial or not, but you'd have the two items, so I think you should definitely figure on an hour for those two. So the earliest the workshop would start would be about 7 p.m.
Thank you. Sure.
On the historical home inventory, property inventory, is that something that is approved by the Planning Commission every year?
The inventory is updated at the direction of the city council. So the last inventory was done in 1997. And so it's been quite a while since we've updated it. You will actually be asked to make a formal recommendation, and we'll be bringing the item to the council after that. It's
So-
not an annual update. It's
Okay, well,
it's ad hoc at direction of the city council.
Okay, well, forget annual, then the question is, do we approve the individual properties to remain on the registry, or if there's additions or changes?
The actual action you'll be taking is, because our zoning code specifically references the 1997 survey, so it's going to be a zone text amendment where we're going to change the date, I think, to not be so specific. We're going to say the inventory as may be updated from time to time. But so it is an actual zoning code amendment, which is falling into the local coastal plan amendment process. You are the recommending body. The city council needs a written recommendation from the planning commission before they consider it.
Sorry to belabor this issue, but are we going to be, or are the properties designated or identified, are they kind of voluntarily self-identified, or is someone imposing this status on them?
Okay, so ARG, they're an architectural firm that specializes in historic properties. So they actually will design renovations on one side of the shop, and then on another side of the shop, they do surveys all over the place. There are criteria that are set that they use, that, they're objective criteria that they use. They've gone through the city and they have created a list of which properties they think meet those objective criteria. So there's not a lot of discretion for you to argue with the properties of whether they should be on the inventory or not. The way our historical preservation ordinance is set up is it's very property rights oriented. So the property owners have the ability to say whether they want their property to be on the local register, and that's when they can qualify for Mills Act benefits and some fee waiver benefits. There might be some recommendations for you all to consider in terms of future code updates to the historical preservation ordinance. It's really a policy decision in terms of how much does a city or a community want to preserve their resources or not. But in terms of the actual inventory itself, it's really a qualified consultant who's gone through and decided which of those properties should be on that, and they do not automatically go onto the local register the way the ordinance is written today.
Thank you.
Follow up on that. So if the the architectural firm recommends a home to be on a home, for an example, to be on the registry, and the owner says, no, I don't want to be a historical home, I want to renovate it the way I want to renovate it, is that, what's the
Well, it's getting a little complicated because, again, these criteria are pretty objective. So they either qualify or they don't. The homeowner does not have to opt to be on the local register, but in terms of from a California Environmental Quality Act perspective, one of the things we have to look at are historic resources. And if a property qualifies, whether it's on a local registry or not, we have to analyze it from a CEQA perspective as a historic resource. So through that process, even though they have opted not to be on the local register, there are some environmental sort of hoops that they have to jump through that may or may not prevent them from doing exactly what they want to do.
Thank you. Any other questions for Director? Okay. Commissioner comments? Commissioner comments?
I'm not the most technically competent person, but when I went on the website and I looked for the video that we saw a number of meetings ago, I was so impressed with that video, and I couldn't find it. So I asked Shana, could you show me that? She says, right on the front page. I said, no possibility. So I went to her office, and right on the front page, in very small print, said business. And I went, okay, I never thought to look there. So my recommendation is that it be featured, and that I think our website is not featuring Dana Point the way it could. And I'm happy to be home. Yeah.
What a complainer.
Thank you. Commissioner Opal?
I do not have anything to add, but on the 23rd, I would be available in the evening, or in the afternoon, sorry, at 4. Or after, both.
Thank you. I have a few comments. I'd like to, I guess, just throw my support behind what Commissioner Donor said about that video, and the links and everything is awesome. I think it should be take up a huge percentage of the front page of the thing so people can find it. So anyway, so this issue, I don't know if we do this or not, but this issue about views and view protection and so forth and so on just seems to come up over and over again. And I'm wondering if we have some kind of an information sheet, or if we don't, if we could get one, so, some kind of really well-written and thorough laying out of the points. That way when people, raise these issues, we give them something right there, and we can, heck, we could put it on the website and have it be available, and something that people can chew on before they start filing appeals and stuff. So that's a suggestion. And just want to comment, I don't know if anyone went down to the shore this weekend, but the surf was phenomenal. And I mean, the weather was spectacular. You just could not be happier to be anywhere than in Dana Point. Those are my comments. Vice Chair?
Well, I'm really, after talking to some friends, I'm sure we all have this afternoon, I'm really happy to be here and not on the 91 or the the 147 or the one that meets the 91, because some of my friends are in serious trouble there. So we are very fortunate to be here, and we don't have the giant hills, and we don't have the impassable roads to get to them, and we can get large equipment in very fast. So yes, we should appreciate that.
Right. And are you available at 4 o'clock next for the Planning Commission in the next 2 weeks?
I guess. Yeah, I'm sure.
All right. I'd just echo the issue with the website. That thing's great. What do I have my notes here? Oh, okay. I am available at 4. If we want to do it at 4, I'm available to do it afterwards. I'd rather get home earlier, but I'd go with the commission's overall consent. And that's it for me.
Thank you. It sounds like we can all do 4 then. So, okay, great. With that, I will adjourn the meeting until the next regularly scheduled meeting. Thank you.